For as long as I can remember, my dad has had a special link to me that mainly keeps me out of trouble. At 6, he came screeching up to the play park as an old man approached me and two other friends. At 15, he ripped the cheat sheet out of my bag, which if I had used, would have made all my qualifications redundant. And lastly, at 18, he came to my shitty apartment with my favorite movie and ice cream, placing the pills in the bin and avoiding the open sore wound of my ex-girlfriend. This is one of these cases. We never really discussed those type of stuff. Thinking back, I must have been about 9 years old. It was the glorious summer holidays, and for my birthday in June, I had received an awesome new phone. Not all of my mates had them, but enough that I could stay up texting after my parents had gone to bed. I would sit in the kitchen eating some unhealthy snacks right before I went to sleep. It became my routine. I would race up my 2 flights of stairs in the dark so as to not wake up my family. I knew those steps, inside out. Pitch black, and there was still no problem. Now, have you ever been in the dark and just felt the need to one sprint and get somewhere light and safe? Well, that's what I experienced every night. That adrenaline-filled, hair-raising experience. How wrong I was to play it off as some childish creation, as I did at the time. This specific day, I remember well. I had been out riding around the town almost the whole day on my bike, playing only as a 9-year-old can. I returned late, it was nearly dark, and sat in the kitchen, gulping water and texting my mates. How fun it was, as my parents retired for the night. Next thing, I glanced up, and it was well past midnight. I had fallen asleep on the kitchen counter. I put my glass to the side and prepared for my nightly race. The fear overwhelmed me before I even started, worse than usual, and panic started to rise as I wasn't even halfway up the first flight of stairs. I focus on the goal above me, reaching out for the light switch to dispel my fear, not caring for anything else in that moment, only to escape. Perhaps it was this new focus that gripped me off balance, but to this day, I swear it was something else. So, I'm here sprawled over my stairs. When my dad was out of his room, he gripped my arm in an iron lock. I have no chance of escaping. I look up and see him glaring directly over my shoulder. Down the stairs, his eyes are filled with hate. He lessened his grip on me and glances down at me for a solid 10 seconds, following his face off with the stairs. I burst out crying as he scooped me up in his arm and places me carefully between himself and my mother in their bed. He never told me what he saw, what really happened that night. What I do know is I woke up the next morning with a huge bruise around my ankle with no clue as to how it got there. I am a 21-year-old girl who grew up just outside of Atlanta in a huge house. It was 3 floors on 4 acres, and it overlooked the 17th hole of a golf course. I shouldn't have had any complaints about my small mansion home, but God, I had one, a big one. Every single person that came over to my house would ask me if it was haunted. Now, it wasn't specifically old home. It was built in the early 90s, but I always had a bad feeling about the house. And I swear to God, I saw shadows in the corners of the room sometimes. I have multiple stories about weird and terrifying things that happened to me, but the one I want to share right now is the only one I had physical evidence of. It started out like a normal day. I was about 15 at the time, and home alone per usual. I had just woken up, sleeping until around noon. I would have liked to slept longer, but I had a vaulted ceiling, and the sun always shone directly onto my face through the skylight. Around this time, I probably should have moved my bed, but that's besides the point. I had walked downstairs lazily, looking for something to eat, but I couldn't find anything instant. So I texted my next-door neighbor, and I made plans to head over there for breakfast and video games. After I showered, as soon as I received her confirmation text, the hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I realized I was alone in my kitchen, standing in the middle of the room. Now, it doesn't sound that creepy, but being 15, standing in the middle of a 12,000 square feet home in a t-shirt and underwear without any lights on, it's terrifying. I quickly glanced to my right to make sure the house alarm was on. The red light signifying alarm was armed was shining, and with that small glimmer of relief, I bolted upstairs, back to my bedroom. Once there, I slammed my door shut and locked it behind me, panting with anxiety. I breathed a sigh of relief and went into my bathroom. The door to my bathroom was in my room, so my false sense of security is what makes me cringe to this day. I took off my t-shirt and underwear and leaned over to turn on the water. I turned the handle all the way to the right. And before I could let go and stand back up, the hair on the back of my arms and neck prickled, and I felt two hands with sharp nails scratch down my back from my neck to my waist. I quickly stood up straight and froze. Do I turn around? Do I act as if nothing happened? I stood frozen for what felt like hours. I refused to turn towards the mirror over the sink. So, I finally turned slowly to my right. Nothing. I called my parents, and they were still gone. The alarm hadn't been set off. They asked me if I was okay, and I pretended I was. I hung up and hesitantly turned off the water, afraid to bend over again. There was no way in hell I was going to be taking a shower in my bathroom now. I threw on whatever clothes I could find, grabbed my phone, and ran the fastest I have ever run to my friend's house next door. She didn't believe me until she looked at my back. I had 10 deep claw marks from the top of my shoulders to my middle back,